Welcome back to the Art and Yoga and Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Kira Whitaker. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a very brief reflection on 2023, all of the major learnings, the lessons, the wins, the barriers that I had in my own health and wellness through business and my personal life. And then I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I'm looking forward to in 2024. So head on over to today's episode and we'll break down 2023 and we'll look at 2024 together. Welcome back to the Art and Yoga and Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Kira Whitaker. You guys, we have made it to 2024. Today, I believe, is, the day that this comes out. I'm actually recording this back in December, but this is airing the first week of January. So I'm assuming if you're listening, you have made it through. We made it through the holidays. It is now the new year. New Year's fun. At least it is for me in health and wellness because it gets busy for me. Always. It's a wild time of year after January in the health and wellness space, at least for me. And I love it because it's when people are kind of ready to step into what's waiting for them health and wellness wise. People tend to make more space in January or be open to trying new things or reestablishing old routines that maybe they got away from over the holidays. And then, as I mentioned in the last episode, I love the beginning of the year because it's exciting. I think it tends to be full of hope, like what could be in your health and wellness and in your life. I also love seasons. I talk about seasons all the time. And I love kind of the reflection of closing out one season and stepping into a new season. And I mean, what better way to do that than closing out a calendar year and stepping into a new one? And so for today's episode, as we kind of ease into getting back into routine, I wanted to just do a little bit of a recap of everything that happened, not everything, but just some highlights of 2023, some lessons, some learnings, some of my biggest barriers, and then also a couple of things that I'm thinking about adding, thinking about doing in 2024 that may or may not happen. It's just things that I'm thinking about. I tend to not hold on to things too tightly. Or declare things as definitively. I just think about it, put it out there, and see what comes back. So that's what I'll do towards the end of the podcast episode. So I want to talk first about just some wins. And I think this is so important. I always have my clients, my health coaching clients, when we do our check-ins every week, I ask them first, what went well? What are some wins? I think we tend to oftentimes reflect on the struggles and the what we didn't do well or what we didn't finish first, which is okay. We'll get to that. Trust me, I'm going to do that today. But I also think it's really, really important to acknowledge our wins, because if we don't acknowledge the wins and the things that go well, it can make it really, really hard to see and acknowledge how far we've come. Because if you don't acknowledge the win, then you don't realize or acknowledge the steps that have been taken, the momentum, the forward movement. So a couple of, I think, big wins for me in 2023, so I'm looking back at the whole year, were I finished up my time with Vanderbilt. Even though it took me years and years and years, like the final thing for me, which I didn't have to do this, I just wanted to, because I mean, if you know my personality, this is just how I am. I sat for the National Health Coaching Boards, which I was already certified as a health coach, but this is your top tier. This is as high as you can go as the national recognition. And it was so hard. I studied so much for that thing. It was so hard. And I had to go to the medical examiner's board, do all the things. And I passed, which was obviously exciting. That's what I wanted. But it just felt like it really closed out a really long season of continuing education for me. And I really like learning. I like continuing education. This is one of the harder things I've done, maybe the hardest thus far, especially being an adult with kids and, a business to run. So that was a really big win, was just getting that back, saying that I passed, getting those letters behind my name. And it was just a reflection of, honestly, the hard work behind the scenes that I don't even think my family really saw, because I was doing it in between juggling the other parts of life. So that was a huge win. Another huge win for us, I say us, me and my husband, in 2023 was we decided to, in all of our businesses, we have 3 different businesses. My husband's business, which I'm a pretty big part of, and then my business, which I'm obviously a pretty big part of. And then we decided to buy this house. It's in Monteagle, Tennessee. So it's a mountain home. And I've gone over the details of kind of how and why in other podcasts we landed on this thing. But it was something that I was so afraid to do, because I don't know if anybody else is aware, but interest rates are not your friend right now. The housing market's kind of scary, and we live in a great spot. I mean, we're in Middle Tennessee, which is a good spot as far as the housing market. But I was just so afraid to do anything that could affect my family negatively financially. And I sat with it. We absolutely consulted a lot of people, mentors, peers, experts that help us in a lot of different ways in business, and got their take on it. We did our homework. We didn't make any decisions out of fear or even out of haste. And we ended up buying the house. We spent half of 2022 and almost all of 2023 finishing this house, because when we bought it, it was at 50% complete. So it was framed up, wired, windows were in, and that was about it. And we finished it, and it's beautiful, and it's on Airbnb because we travel quite a bit with our kids and travel sports. And, we're just in a season of really, really all hands on deck with them. And it's just been so exciting. It's something that for me, I count as a win, because we had to really lean into areas that are not our expertise, and we had to learn on the fly, and we had to make mistakes, and we had to eat money sometimes because we made this mistake here. And then we got to collaborate. That's something that my husband and we do obviously all throughout our day in life, but this was just a really fun way for us to use some of our talents and gifts together on a project. And it turned out beautifully. I'm so in love with it. It's on Instagram. That the handle is Doc Holiday, DOC. You can go look at it. And so that was a really big win, just because it was out of our comfort zone. It was something that we could have easily said no to, and our life, trust me, would have been a lot easier for one full year, because taking that on with my husband's business and my business and the season we're in with our children was real risky. But it was worth the risk. So that was another really, really big win. Another win for me this year was taking back a little bit of, I don't think ownership is the right word, but maybe just agency in different areas of my business. And what I mean by that is I made a lot of shifts this past spring. Well, I announced a lot of shifts within my business and implemented those this summer. And the reason I did that is because I have different things within my business, which you're all aware of. I have the podcast, which is free. I have therapeutic yoga, which is one of my offerings, is how I support clients, and it's one of my greatest passions. And then I also have health coaching, which is another way I support my clients in health and wellness, and it's another passion that I love and I truly believe in as a support and service. But I found myself, especially because we were also finishing this house, our son had just entered middle school, which meant the kids were at two different schools for the first time ever. I found myself going, I'm spinning all of the plates and I've been doing it, but I'm going to drop a plate. I feel it coming. And so I put myself in this position of it can be either or. And so because I could not see, a million yoga clients every week anymore, and the charting and the billing and the schedule and all of my coaching clients that I see online, plus the podcast, and then the other businesses we have, I had it in my head that if I couldn't do it the way I'd always done it, I couldn't do it. Meaning if I couldn't run the studio the way I always had in conjunction with health coaching, then I couldn't do it. And I think the win here is I emailed this is the win, but I emailed all my clients and just said, you can work with me online. This is the way I can support you and my family at the same time. And it has to look like this. And of course, all my clients are lovely and we're like, we understand, but also we don't like this. We want to work with you. We still want to see you in person. We still want to be a yoga client, And I was on my way home. I was passing the cow farm on the way home, just silence in my car alone. And I had this realization of I'm the business owner. I don't have a boss. I don't have one. It's me. I'm the only person that is on this LLC. And I thought I can do this however I want, and we can try something different. We can find a compromise. And if that doesn't work, I can be transparent with my clients and say, I don't feel like this is the best way for me to support you. And so what I was able to do within that is take back a few of my long-standing yoga clients. I'm talking, I got a couple that have been with me 12 years, and switch our studio over to, I gave up my space that I'd had for like 7 years at my good friend, Dr. Kelly's chiropractic studio, and talked to my friend Shelby, who's my photographer, and we use her beautiful photography studio 2 days a week. And I see yoga clients there, the same ones. I'm not taking anybody new right now. We're fully booked. And that just felt really good. The win there was me saying that I get to write the rules in my business. And it doesn't have to look a certain way because so-and-so does it this way. And I can also play around with things and be really honest with my clients and say, this is not working for me. And if it doesn't work for me, I can't support you. Or I thought this was going to be this way and it's not. And so just having that voice of leadership, but also agency over my business and my time and what works well for me. So that was just a win, is figuring that out. And ultimately, I feel like I get best of both worlds now. And it feels really balanced. And it feels really good. Another win this past year in 2023 was launching a podcast. So this is, I honestly, until right now, I don't think I've realized how big this is that we launched a freaking podcast. And when I say launched a podcast, we didn't put me, and not that this is not me being ugly. If you're doing it this way, I don't have it in me. I'm not that gifted. I can't. But we just went 100%. We said, if we're doing this, we're doing it with the mentality and the mindset that we're keeping it, that it's going to be a forever thing, that it's going to be a baby that we grow and grow and grow, just like we've done everything else within this business. And we hired an incredible production team. You guys have heard me talk about them over and over. And basically said, this is my expertise is health and wellness and riffing on this all day, but computers and audio engineering and all of the things that it takes to get a podcast out into the world and get it done well are not my gifts. And we were lucky enough to get hooked up with our production team. And so in 2023, a pretty big win was launching a podcast, because I've wanted to do it for forever. But the idea of me doing it alone felt very, very just paralyzing. And so that was a huge win. Another win of 2023 was expanding my team. And when I say expanding my team, it's not like, oh, like we hired more people. Like that's it. It's the win is me realizing that I cannot grow in any way, mind, body, spirit, without support. And I'm going to do a whole podcast on this and hit us all in the gut with it, because I've had so many realizations over the past few months about this. But just being in a place where my business is I don't want to say large, because we're not a big business, but successful enough to be able to bring in help is a win. But also just having the growth mindset of I can't grow on my own and I need support. And how do I want to feel supported? It's by having people that are experts and have gifts that are not my own come on to the team. And so that's been really, really fun. And that's been a huge win for me this past year. There's so many other wins, but I don't want to make this a 5-hour podcast. So the next thing I'm going to go through is my 2023 learnings and barriers. And so I'm going to kind of combine these just because they go hand in hand. I think barriers create learnings. Learnings create, different barriers and routes in your journey in health and wellness. But I definitely have had a lot. I think one of the biggest learnings this year that I've had that I haven't already talked about in the wins is I greatly underestimated the attention and care that my parenting would need as my children get older. And as many of you know, some of you might know, I started Art Yoga and Wellness as a brick and mortar yoga studio when Ori, our son, was 1, maybe like 18 months. And then right after that, and we started taking off, then I had Willow, because they're a little shy of 3 years apart. And all I've known is business while having very small children and having them with me. And I think that I had this expectation that I had this expectation that when they're not little, it'll all be easier. And it's just some things get easier, but you trade them for other challenges. And I'm here for the challenge. So this is not me complaining. I love parenting. I parent pretty hard. We kind of have the mindset of if it's easy, then we're not doing it right. And I think that I just had it in my head that, once they're older, once I have a middle schooler, I'm going to have a lot more time. And nothing could be farther from the truth, because even though the baby gates are gone, and even though those plug things aren't in the outlet, and even though there's not as many choking hazards, and what I'm not having to do is protect them as much physically, but I'm having to protect their minds and their hearts and their spirits on a whole nother level, because since they are away from me more, I don't want to say away, but they're just, they're growing, they need to have certain amounts of not necessarily freedom, but things outside of our house. Like, okay, we'll go to a basketball game and you can go walk around, here, or okay, you get to use my phone to go FaceTime a friend, things like that, right? I have to be so rested and aware in my heart and my mind and my spirit to parent in that way now. Whereas before I felt like it was more my physical body was always protecting their physical body and keeping them alive and well. Now it's shifted, and all those things are still true, but that's definitely been a learning or maybe even an unlearning. I thought that I knew something, and then fast forward to 2023 and I was like, oh, you don't know anything. You better get ready because your kids are getting older and it is wild out there. But all of that to say, I've loved it. I've loved this new season with them, especially our middle schooler. But it was definitely something that I learned because I just thought it was going to be a little bit different. I don't know. I was very, very naive. Okay, another thing, a big learning I think that I had this year is I've really learned, especially as not only, I don't want to say business has grown, but especially before COVID, we were really more of kind of a local business, meaning most of my clients and the way I did business, because before that I had never used Zoom, was on a much more kind of local level. And then once we got Zoom and we started having programs online, and then also once I started taking clients, I mean, I have clients that live all over the United States. I have people that I do stuff, that I work with that are not even in the United States. And so all different time zones, all different locations. And that's definitely brought a lot of different exposure and voices and opinions and comments. Because in order to put yourself out there and offer more support to the world, in your realm and in what you do, you are also inviting in all of the negative things as well. And I like to think that I have a thick skin. I think that's probably not true. I've mentioned on here before, I have really, really worked to not be a functioning people pleaser, but I do care what people think. My heart is always to do the right thing and to be kind and to be loving, but to be honest and to be truthful and to be supportive. And I think in this past year, one thing that I've learned and I have to continue to relearn is it is okay to be misunderstood. It is okay if someone assumes something about you or assumes that something they heard you say or sees something and puts a story together that is not behind the scenes, the what happened in real time. If someone is dead set and determined to misunderstand you, you just have to let that go, because there is not enough time in the day or the week to run around explaining and clarifying yourself to people. There's just not, and you will run yourself ragged, and you'll also run yourself ragged and completely deplete yourself if you think about it, or if you wonder about it, or if it takes up too much mental space. I have learned in 2023, if people are not my clients, if they are not my direct family, meaning in my house, or if they're not in my direct circle of friends, and I don't mean acquaintances, I mean like my handful of people, you know who you are. If it's not within that, and there's something outside of that is ugly or is misunderstood or misrepresented, and it's not brought to you in a one-on-one conversation directly, then you just let it go. You just let it go. You let it be what it is. You set it aside and you move on, because I have learned that is one consequence of just being out there, and to put yourself out there and to be present in the world. You also invite a certain level of misunderstanding, whether it's intentional or not. And so that's something that I've really had to make sure that I'm just, kind of honest about, and let move through me and not sit too long. So that was a big learning. And not that I don't know that, but you can know something, but then when you have to put it into practice, then you really have to know something. Like, but do you know? Last thing and my big learnings, and these are all personal, your health is always evolving. And I know that, guys. I mean, I work on this all day, every day with people. But just being in my mid-30s and things shifting in my body and with my hormones and my life and my schedule, I've really, really had to disattach from what I am convinced will always work and unlearn some things and go, that worked then. We have to learn what works now. I've also had to be open enough to being really, really flexible and playful and curious and experimental in my health and wellness, because there are things that even a year ago worked really well for me, but they don't now because things have changed. Things also with my schedule and my life. And so I have had to really, really practice what I preach, in that I have to continuously learn in my health and wellness and give things a long enough span to where I can put it into practice and not give up, but also not live in a state where I'm so attached to what was comfortable and what worked in a season to where I'm not willing to go, I got to lay this down because it worked. It's not now. And we're getting off this hamster wheel. And so that was another big learning of mine this year, because I've definitely hit some barriers in my health and wellness, in a lot of different ways. So that's something that I'm actually looking forward to in 2024. I've got some things that I'm just really jamming out on right now, health and wellness wise, that I'm looking forward to taking into the new year for sure. And now what we're going to talk about is some things to look forward to in 2024 for me personally. This year was such a huge year of change. Again, just business growth, at that Mountain House project, having a middle schooler and a teenager now. I hadn't done that before. A lot of stuff shifted for us this year. It was a massive year of change. A lot of good stuff, but change is hard. Change can be difficult. And so something that I definitely am going to be doing in 2024 is more podcast guests. I don't ever want to be a podcast talk show and just, do guests, because I really like just short, sweet, concise solo episodes. One reason I didn't have more guests on in 2023 was my schedule was not a schedule that I would ever wish someone had to collaborate with. And so I was an actual nightmare when it came to scheduling last year. And so trying to get people on the podcast would have been a disaster. We did a few times and it was great, but that was about all I could do. But for 2024, we have a lineup of some really great people to have on the podcast, a couple of which I'm like, what? You're going to come on this podcast and talk with me? Like, awesome. So we'll have more guests just to switch it up and to, collaborate. And I love talking to people. I'm so curious and I love asking people questions and I love learning. So selfishly, it'll check all of those boxes for me. Probably going to add a couple of things to wellness offerings, just because I have to do a lot of continuing education to keep up with all my certifications. And so I'm always thinking, well, we might as well make it worth it. So some things that I've toyed around with is just adding maybe labs to health coaching, adding that in conjunction with it, because that's something that I think is just really great. One of the beautiful things about Western medicine is that we don't have to guess. We have imaging. We have lab work. We can just pull things and look and see exactly what's going on in the body. So that's something that I'm going to look into. Also, I think something that we may look into, we are right now, but I don't really know what's going to happen. Again, the housing market right now is not my friend with current interest rates. But we may look into a brick and mortar space. And when I say that, I don't mean to do, big group classes again or anything, but just a space where I live in town for an office, and to have space to see my in-person clients and potentially more. I'll just leave it at that. Potentially more. Me and my husband we really love a project as far as buildings and homes. And I think eventually we're going to run out of stuff out here on the farm, buildings to put up and projects to do. We're doing one right now on our offices out here. And then we just did the mountain house. So that's something that's on my radar. But again, very, very, like, we have just started to scratch the surface on that. And it's not anything that I would push. It would be if we found the perfect place and the perfect location, which I have my eye on, then it might be something that we do. That way we can eventually find a balance of in-person things, me be able to do the in-person clinical side of what I do, and then maintain all of the online things that we do as well. And then the other things in 2024 I'm looking forward to is just finessing all of the learnings I talked about. You can rewind every single learning I talked about. I just want to build upon it. I just want to continue to do those things well and to learn as I do them. The teenager thing, my kids, our time together, making sure that I'm just completely supporting them, mind, body, and spirit at all times. And in order to do that well, I have to make sure I'm supported in those areas. I want to continue to grow art and yoga and wellness, but in a way that keeps it intimate and feeling just like a wellness home for people. And continuing to work on my own health and wellness. I think one big goal I have in 2024 is to ride my horse and to actually be outside my animals more. That's something that I did not do a lot of in 2023 now that I think of it. And I desperately, desperately miss it. But we weren't home a lot. We were either here or at the kids' schools or at the soccer fields or working on the mountain house. And so that's something in 2024 that I long to do, is just ride more trail rides, more horseback riding, more farm animals, maybe another mini cow, maybe if I can talk my husband into it. And I think that's about it. All right, guys, that is my 2023 reflections. Again, I could have made that 5 days long. That was so short and sweet, and it doesn't even scratch the surface of all of the takeaways and things that I got out of 2023. But I thought it'd just be a good first episode of 2024. Reflect a little bit, think about what went well, what we learned, what are some barriers, and then keep our eyes up for 2024 and see what's on the horizon. All right. You guys know where to find me. As always, it's so good to be with you. I love you guys. I'll see you in the next episode.